Okay, in this session I would be trying to elaborate the life cycle, pathogenicity, control measures and treatment for fasciolosis, that is infection of Fasciola hepatica, liver fluke. First of all, let's understand the morphology of liver fluke. It's a flatworm belonging to phylum Platyhelminthes and class Trematoda. The body is dorsoventrally flattened with triploblastic yet acylimate and bilaterally symmetrical organization. There's a least developed alimentary tract with single opening of mouth leading to a short pharynx and a highly branched intestine. That is all it has as an alimentary tract. This opening of mouth, it has a sucker close to it. That's part of the parasitic adaptation. It's an endoparasite, so as I discussed in the earlier session, it has all those due adaptations. One of them is this sucker around the mouth. This is called as the oral sucker. The oral sucker on the mouth inside, it basically helps in ingesting the food, that is the tissue it feeds upon. Liver tissue it preferably feeds upon. Whereas on the ventral side there is one more sucker, it's called as ventral sucker or acetabulum, that helps it in attaching to the liver tissue so that it can continue feeding on it. In addition to this, a few more structures which could be seen in the morphological view. On the ventral side, between oral sucker and ventral sucker, there is an opening called as a gonopore or a reproductive aperture. Then on the posterior side, there's another opening, that is the excretory pore, which leads to an excretory canal that divides, redivides, and finally ends into phlegm cells, which happens to be the unit of excretory system in this animal. In the diagram you can also see part of the reproductive system representing there. Just next to the gonopore there is the uterus where the eggs will be collected and stored. Next is the ovary. Below you can see the testes. Now, though it's a hermaphrodite animal, it prefers cross fertilization. But if it's not possible, it undergoes self-fertilization. Now, this adult which I have described right now, it's the one that stays inside the body. Ideally, the host happens to be a sheep or a ruminating animal, but it is also known to infest human beings. As I said, it stays in the liver and causes damage to the liver tissue, leads to certain disorders which I will discuss in the due course of time. Now let's get to understand the life cycle. The adult which I just described, it produces eggs which are released out in form of a cluster that's covered by a highly protective covering, can be called as a cyst. And these eggs, along with the protective covering, they are digested by the animal first and by the host, that is human being, later on through feces. That is a cyst with unembryonated eggs. The eggs are yet to develop into embryos. It stays in aquatic conditions, so let us say in water or in mud, and then develops into embryonated eggs. These embryonated eggs then hatch out as Miracidium larva. This Miracidium larva, you can see it's a flattened worm with a large number of ciliary projections and an eye spot. Eye spot is some photosensitive organ that it's provided with. It then invades a limnid snail, a freshwater snail. Inside this snail, part of its life cycle would continue. So we can call this to be an intermediate host. The Miracidium larva then develops into a sporocyst. Inside this sporocyst, the cells start developing or modifying themselves into tiny larval stages. This sporocyst gradually develops into Redia. As could be seen, Redia already contains developing larvae, and these larvae are nothing but stages called Cercaria. Up to here, the development takes place inside the snail, and it takes around a few weeks to a few months for this development to complete, that is inside the snail. And the period would depend mainly upon the temperature and humidity. Here, the multiplication is almost 500 times, and the Cercaria larvae which come out then start developing outside the snail. It's a free living stage. As could be seen, it has a long tail-like extension, an opening of mouth with an oral sucker, and a ventral sucker also has been formed. Primitive development of intestine also could be seen here. Then these gradually get encysted and develop into Metacercaria. Now mind well, here the tail is not seen anymore. It just has an oral sucker, a ventral sucker, and a partially developed intestine. It is this stage which then has to enter the primary host. These Metacercaria, they stay attached to leaves, submerged plants, and through these leaves they enter the herbivores, or even for human beings. The watercress is the common carrier of this pathogen towards human being. Watercress is the vegetable which is consumed by human beings. Many a times it is consumed raw, but sometimes it is cooked. If it's consumed raw, or if it is not partially cooked, then these Metacercaria, they get transformed into human beings. Through the digestive tract, they enter into duodenum, and then they penetrate the duodenal wall to get into the coelomic cavity, the peritoneal cavity. Through this peritoneal cavity, they move towards the bile duct and liver and start developing further. So here, initially they cause some damage to the duodenal tissue, later on the bile duct, liver, and so on. The liver, then they undergo further development, produce eggs, and the life cycle would be repeated thereafter. Let us understand something about epidemiology. As such, this pathogen is found almost world over except Antarctica, and grossly it infects the herbivorous animals, but sometimes it is capable of invading human beings as well. The Metacercaria larvae, as I said, they are found in contaminated water or stuck to the aquatic plants. Consumption of these aquatic plants, or as I mentioned, watercress, can transmit them into human beings where they can start growing further. As I said, they are capable of causing a damage to the bile duct, liver, and the symptoms therefore happen to be nausea, vomiting, tenderness in the abdomen, rashes could be developed, and as such they are also found to be invading other tissues as well, leading to related disorders. In the nervous tissue, they could cause neurological symptoms, but commonly they lead to symptoms which are similar to jaundice. Bile duct could be clogged, leading to inflammation of liver, gallbladder, or even pancreas at times, which is called as cholangitis or cholecystitis. That is inflammation of these parts. Now, its development inside the liver or gallbladder, it takes a few weeks to a few months, and till then there are no peculiar ways to diagnose it unless the eggs are excreted through feces and the feces fecal analysis is done. It's difficult to detect this disease. Nausea, vomiting could be treated otherwise, but diagnosis is otherwise a bit difficult. Yet blood analysis can help us in identifying presence of antibodies for this particular pathogen, and on the basis of that the diagnosis can be done. Now the acute stage, which is also called as the migratory stage or the invasive stage or the hepatic stage or parenchymal stage or larval stage. As I said, it is difficult to diagnose in normal course of time. Only antibody detection can help us in defining it. Whereas the chronic phase, which is also called as the biliary phase or the adult phase, it can be diagnosed by detecting the presence of eggs in the fecal matter. And then the treatment basically involves administering a drug called mebendazole or albendazole. It's available in orally consumable tablets. Depending upon the severity of the infection, the dosage can be monitored. Though treatment is available, prevention is better recommended, and prevention would be basically avoiding consumption of the possible carriers of this pathogen, that is watercress, as I mentioned. Or if it has to be consumed, it should be properly cooked. It is also likely to be transmitted through improperly cooked meat. The sheep or goat or other herbivores are also known to be infected. So if such animals are used as a source of meat, and if the meat has not been cooked appropriately, this disease can be transmitted. So properly cooked food, it's a better recommendation for avoiding this pathogenic transmission. How do you like the video? Just press the like, subscribe to it, share amongst your friends and family, and don't forget to post your comments or suggestions. Thank you.